Okay, thank you, Patrice. Good morning, everybody. I am filling in Adam, our president, Adam Chaplain, will be joining us at around noon this morning. So if you could bear with me a little bit. I'd now like to call the MAPC Executive Committee meeting of April 26, 2023 to order. With that, the meeting, little bit of meeting information. The Executive Committee meeting is being conducted remotely via Zoom video conference consistent with Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023. This includes an extension until March 31st, 2025 of the remote meeting provisions of former Governor Baker's executive order of March 12th, 2020, which suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location, to provide public access to the meeting while limiting the potential for abuse of video conferencing technology, for example, Zoom bombing. Members of the public may view the proceedings at www.youtube.com/user/MAPC Metro Boston. To open the meeting, I will call the roll. Imai?
Present.
Sharonda?
Aye.
Colette?
Present.
Kurt?
Kurt is going to be unavailable today. He did email me.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Karen Canfield? Adam will be joining us later. Myself, Jennifer Constable. Tom Daniel will also be joining us late. John DePriest.
Here.
Tom Galligani. Mo.
Here.
Diego, I believe, will also be joining us around noon. Shagan. Tabor.
Here.
Angie Lou.
Here.
Gina Martinez. Steve Ovenoff. I saw you wave.
Yeah.
Sandy Pooler.
Here.
Courtney. Rainey. Rondina.
Present.
Sam Seidel.
Here.
Elaine Vina. Juan Vega. And Erin Wortman.
Present.
Okay, thank you, everybody. With that roll call, first on our agenda, we do have revisions in voting process at executive committee meetings. And I think, Mark, will I hand that off to you?
Sure. Thank you. So this is at the recommendation of Mo from some of his experiences with the MWRA Advisory Board. He suggested a while back that we should have a new procedure that allows us to roll up as many of our motions as possible into an omnibus roll call at the end of the meeting in order to ensure that, or in order to save time, especially on roll calls when we're doing remote or hybrid meetings. Take a long time to call 25 names. Adam particularly thought this was a great idea since he considers these roll calls to be the bane of his existence. And we were going to just discuss that procedurally today, but someone suggested to me yesterday that we should try and have something in writing, and I think that's a good idea. So I actually just sent to all of you about 10 minutes ago what is an adaptation of the MWRA voting procedure. And if you are all able to simply look at that on your screens, that would probably be the easiest. If you want me to share it, I can probably figure out how to do that. Would people want me to share it, or do you all have it there? No? Okay, seems like you all probably have it. The only significant difference between this system and MWRA Advisory Board is the Advisory Board, at least, I mean, Mo knows, Mo is an attendee. I'm not an attendee, but I read their document. They seem to wrap all votes up until the end. I would suggest that instead of doing that, we separate procedural from substantive votes, and that we vote on the procedural votes at the end of the meeting, but the substantive votes we continue to handle separately. The reason for that is, frankly, I mean, first of all, I think it's a good idea to have a public record of substantive votes. But secondly, we sort of have a little bit of a unique circumstance with our ex officio representatives who on a policy item very often abstain because they do not know what the position of the administration is, or the administration has not taken a position on that issue. And I didn't want to put them in a position of having to feel like they always have to abstain from the omnibus vote, just because it may include one item on which they needed to abstain. So I've separated procedural and omnibus and substantive out from one another, leaving that to the discretion of the presiding officer. And I hope that you will consider those procedures to be acceptable. And if so, I don't think we need a vote on it, but maybe it's a good idea to have a vote on it.
I'll make a motion to approve it.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Motion by
I'll second.
Priest and a second by Tabor. And I see we have a few hands raised, so open up for discussion. Steve?
Yeah, so sometimes meetings run late and people have to leave before the end of the meeting. So wouldn't it be better to determine at which point all the procedural items are done and have that vote there in the middle of the meeting, so everyone can get to vote? And you can probably figure out in advance and put it right on the agenda.
Yeah, very good point, Steve. I also thought about that. Sometimes you start losing a quorum toward the end of the meeting, but the procedural items tend to be at the beginning. Maybe we could even do it sort of after what appears to be the last procedural item. For example, today, other than this item, I think we're really only going to have two votes. They're both procedural. And after the second one, which would be the treasurer's report, we could just do it. If you wanted to adopt this procedure, but I will adjust the words at the conclusion of the meeting, I'm glad to do that.
Yeah, usually it probably will be after the treasurer's report in most meetings. So I think you could figure that out in advance, put it on the agenda, and just do it then. That would be acceptable if you make that change.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Vandana?
So I had a question and maybe a comment as well. Could you define what you mean by procedural votes? So which one of the types of votes would come under that category?
Well, I gave some examples, and I'm a little more comfortable giving examples than I am giving a definition, to be perfectly honest.
That's
It's things like the approval of the treasurer's report, the approval of minutes. I would view this vote now as a procedural vote. But when it's on a public policy item or an item that's going to, I specifically listed increasing the annual assessment because I feel that that's a substantive issue that our members care about, particularly our city and town members. I would say that it should be that I consider to be a substantive matter. Knowing that there might be some debate on this, my thought was that it is adequate to allow the presiding officer to make that judgment. And I would urge the presiding officer to do so with a sort of a thumb on the scale of having a separate vote. There, if anyone wants, and I think the document indicates this, if anyone wants a procedure, an individual vote, they can have it.
And I do appreciate having that distinction because I know for several items, I certainly, as other ex officio members, will need to abstain, legislative being one of them, and certainly certain policy ones as well. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Vandana. Erin?
Thanks. I think it's a great idea. The only question I had was on legislative matters. So if an action is to be taken, I guess it's not your decision, it'd be Jennifer's decision, but if you're seeking like action, that would require, it wouldn't be a procedural vote, correct? Is that how you're interpreting that? Okay.
Yes, that's why actually in the document, which I am very much aware I only sent to you 10 minutes ago, I actually list substantive items actually include a legislative item,
Okay,
because I feel that's always substantive.
thank you.
Thanks, Erin. Are there any other questions or comments on this agenda item? Okay, seeing none. Before I go on, I just want to acknowledge that Steve Silvera is with us. Apologies, Steve. I think I overlooked you on the roll call, and it looks like Karen Canfield has also joined us. Mark, I know that you said you view this as a procedural question, although technically procedural, I think it might be substantive in nature at this point in time. So I will, where it's a procedural change for the meetings, I will go ahead and do a roll call vote for this item. And I would entertain, I don't think we had I take that back. We did have a motion, I believe by Steve and a second by Tabor. Okay.
For the record, I agree with the change. There's
Okay.
Steve Olonos change request.
Thank you, Tabor. Imai,
Aye.
Sharonda,
Aye.
Colette,
Aye.
Karen,
I'll abstain. I missed the conversation.
and I don't think Adam has joined yet. Myself, Jennifer, I, Tom Daniel. John DePriest,
Aye.
Tom Galligani. Mo,
Aye.
is Diego joined? Shugan? Tabor,
Aye.
Angie,
Aye.
Gina,
Aye.
Steve, Olenoff,
Aye.
Sandy,
Aye.
Courtney Rainey. Not joined. Vandana,
Aye.
Sam,
Yes.
Steve Silvera,
Aye.
Elaine, is not joined, and Erin.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes unanimously. Thank you, everybody. Okay, next item on our agenda is approval of minutes from March 15th, 2023. Were there any questions or comments on the minutes? And if none, I would accept a motion to accept the minutes of March 15th, 2023.
I make that motion.
Okay, motion by
Second.
Colette. Second by Mo. Any discussion? Okay, hearing none, I would say this is a procedural vote. And so all those in favor?
I think actually,
It's
no, it just gets delayed, and then there does have to be a roll call on the omnibus, which will include the minutes.
Right.
okay, so one roll call at the end of the meeting
Or sooner.
or sooner.
Right.
Okay, understood. All right, so. And then we had a motion from Colette and a second from Mo. Okay, so we will move on to our next agenda item, which is report of the treasurer. And I will go to Sam Seidel.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you for your leadership. Sam Seidel, Treasurer. Today, we're looking at the February 2023 income statement. This will be a relatively quick report. We're basically tracking the overhead rate. That's probably what we're most focused on now. It's looking good. Overall, you see it's at 119.7%, which is up from the original 118%, but as you'll remember, we revised that, went to Mass DOT and got 121% approved. So we're just keeping track of sort of where we are in all of that conversation. If you look at year to date, we're at 118.7%. So we're actually close to that original 118%. But we expect that other items, including prepaid items that happened early in the year, will show up on the books later overall, and that will lift our overhead rate closer to the 121%. The only other thing I'd note is the direct labor, while looking very healthy at 94% of budget, is down a little bit from the January number, and that is largely because February is a shorter month and there was more vacation time taken there. And then finally, the net income increase to fund balance, which is the bottom line. If you go all the way over to the right-hand column, you'll see it's at 51,000. That is in part because we did pretty well on the money markets over the time, and so that has increased that number, which we like, but we're more focused on the other fundamentals. That concludes the treasurer's report, and with that, I will hand it back to President Pro Tem Jennifer Constable.
Thanks, Sam. Are there any questions for Sam? Okay, seeing none, I believe this would also be a procedural vote. Is there a motion to accept the report as presented?
So move.
A motion by Mo, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Tabor. Okay, and we will table that vote to the end of the meeting or sooner.
And
Next,
Jennifer, I think since those are the only two votes of any kind that I'm anticipating today, if you wanted to proceed with the roll call on both of those together, you could.
okay, all right, thanks, Mark. And if there are no objections, then I will call the roll. Imai,
Aye.
Sharonda,
Aye.
Colette,
Aye.
Karen,
Aye.
Adam, not yet. Myself, I, Tom Daniel, John DePriest,
Aye.
Tom Galligani, Mo Handel,
Aye.
Diego, Shagan, Tabor,
Aye.
Angie,
Aye.
Gina Martinez,
Aye.
Steve Olenoff,
Aye.
Sandy,
Aye.
Vandana,
Aye.
Sam Seidel,
Aye.
Steve Silvera,
Aye.
and Aaron Wortman.
Aye.
That motion, those motions passed unanimously. Thank you, everybody. Okay, next item on the agenda is report of the legislative committee. Keith, will you take this from here, or should I turn to Leah or Lizzie?
I'm happy to report. It's Keith Bergman, Chair of the Legislative Committee, past president, and happy to turn it over to Leah Robbins for our report. The Legislative Committee met earlier this month. We do not have any recommendations for vote today, but I'm sure we will in the future. So thanks so much.
Yes, definitely. Thank you, Keith. It's a busy week right now. The House is taking up the fiscal 24 budget literally as we speak. So I'm going to give you guys a brief rundown as to where we are with the budget process generally, and then where we are specifically with the House and some of those priority line items that we've been watching closely. Talk a little bit about some legislation on the move, and then legislative breakfasts that are filling much of our time, and we're hope to share those invitations with you as well. So on budget, the House Committee on Ways and Means released their version about 2 weeks ago. Many amendments were filed, a few hundred amendments. They have so far taken up 5 different topics: education, health and human services, public safety, public health, state admin, transportation. We were disappointed to not see an increase in the Shannon grant on the House side. They're proposing level funding, which is still excellent. It is still $12.3 million for the program. And we are going to be pushing hard on the Senate to see if we can get that number increased to provide more resources for communities. We are still hoping for an increase on district local technical assistance and the ability to provide communities with support around applying for and managing federal funds. Literally, the discussion is happening at 1 o'clock, so apologies if I'm closely watching my phone to see if there's other ways we can help legislators be prepared for that discussion. But we are working closely with our sponsors, and thank you to many of you who reached out to our legislators to ask for their support of the amendment. We have 53 co-sponsors last I checked, which is more than we had last year, which is really exciting. And a number of them are from within the MAPC region, which is really exciting. We anticipate that the budget is going to finish probably this afternoon or tomorrow morning, based on the categories that they have left. Once they finish, the budget will go to the Senate, where we expect the Senate Ways and Means Committee will be releasing their budget, I think in this 3rd week of May. And ideally that will wrap up with a final budget being signed into law by July 1. So that's kind of where we are with budget. I'll pause there to see if there are any questions.
I'm in a meeting, so let me just tell you, it looks like the date and the time slot is in the wrong place. Okay. I'm sorry, folks. I will.
I would say too, some of the other amendments that we've been watching have been related to the SAFE Act and funding for that program. Unfortunately, that was not successful in the House, but on the good news, like good news, bad news, the good news is that the bill that would support that initiative of providing more support and structure for our local public health departments is having a hearing coming up next week, which is a really great sign to have an early hearing on the legislation. And MAPC has endorsed the bill, as has MARPA, so we're working to get testimony for that proposal. So that's kind of where we are for budget. On legislation on the move, the SAFE Act that I mentioned, I'm really excited for that. The Environment Committee is having a hearing on some drought-related bills today. Lots of movement really picking up. So we are turning into testimony-ready machines to support the many proposals that this executive committee has endorsed. We're really excited to be weighing in with legislators on the wide array of Metro Common topics. One of the other ways that the government affairs team has been weighing in with legislators, just to share with all of you, is our annual legislative breakfast. So we had our legislative breakfast with the SWAP region, trick region. I'm losing my acronyms today. I apologize.
SWAP.
It was SWAP. Thank you, Mark. And are working on having that whole series in the next few weeks. So it's 8 breakfasts. So pretty much every Friday morning, you'll find the government affairs team with Mark and Lizzie on the road. And if you are able to join us, we would love to have you. So we will work to share that schedule with all of you in case you are able to join these legislative breakfasts for your region or for others in the area. It is amazing how the same set of questions gets very different answers in different parts of our region and different follow-up questions from members in the region. I think one of the things that I love most about these breakfasts is the questions that legislators bring for their planners and planning staff, and the questions that come from the member communities to their legislators, and the way that conversation goes in directions that we couldn't have anticipated at the beginning. So I'm so grateful for everyone that comes to make those conversations so productive. And that is what I have for you on this very busy 3rd day of the budget in the House.
Great, thanks, Leah. Budget by July 1st is also always welcomed. And
Yeah,
I
we'll
know on the
see.
South- we'll be hopeful. And I know on the South Shore, we're looking forward to meeting in person for the legislative breakfast, I believe this Friday morning. So thank you. Are there any questions for Keith or Liz, Leah?
I have one.
Imai?
Yeah, thanks. Leah, was there anything legislatively happening with the idea of moving away from notifications for hearings published in a newspaper?
Not yet. So a bill has been filed on that. I think more than one bill has been filed on that topic, and it hasn't had a hearing yet.
Okay.
All
right.
But yes, I can let you know.
I
Thank
don't
you.
think we were anticipating that. I don't think that we were anticipating that matter would be handled by the budget because there are substantive bills, and I think people want those bills to be heard. So we're going to have to wait a little bit longer. But
Gotcha.
I think the legislature will respond to this one. A lot of members are just seeing that that local option sadly does not exist anymore, and we need to do something to rationalize this system and bring it into the 21st century, I guess.
Yeah, when I tell applicants about the cost of advertising in the Globe, they kind of flip.
Yeah.
So
There is always the Herald.
that one too, not cheap either. All right, thank you, appreciate it.
Thanks, Imai. Okay, any other questions for Leah? No. Okay, seeing none. We'll move on to our next agenda item, which is project inventory. And I believe this will be a presentation from Ben Faust, Senior Strategist for Evaluation and Learning, Department of Strategic Initiatives. And Ben will provide us with the annual project inventory report. And I believe I see Ben on the line. Mark, I don't know where you.
I'll just remind people that we do our annual project inventory every year. We used to do it every 6 months, but the last several years we do it every year. Ben has been working to assemble this data. All of our directors contribute to the database. Ben always looks for innovative and new ways to try and assess the data, and we like to use it to give us a sense of what we're doing a lot, where we're doing a lot of work and where we need to do more work, whether it be geographically, topically, by metro common priority, or whatever. This is not a tool that assesses the quality or caliber of our work, but it is a tool that assesses what we're doing and where. And so I want to start by thanking Ben for spearheading this effort and turn it over to him for a presentation to you.
Thanks, Mark. And thanks, Jen, and hi to XCOM. Yes, so Mark did a great job of explaining why we do this and what it is. I would add that we have a project database, and we ask our staff, my colleagues, to log their projects annually. We do that so we can see what's going on where, identify any trends, and really start conversations about why the data is what it is and what, if anything, we want to change or improve about our work to see the trends change. I like to give the caveat that this is a representation of the data that's in the database. So that assumes I think my colleagues have gotten a lot more diligent about adding data. I wouldn't say it's never going to be perfect. I like to think that this is a great snapshot, while not 100% accurate, of everything we're doing, that we've done over the past couple of years in the region. So I'll share my screen. And we will go through some of the data points that you've seen before and traditionally see during this process. And there are a couple different ones that we thought were particularly interesting this year that we'll show. Everybody see that? Thumbs up. Awesome. All right. So kind of starting from the most basic data point, how many projects are we doing each year? Like Mark said, this doesn't necessarily doesn't show quality, nor does it show how much money each project represents. So it's really just like, the total number of projects we're doing each year. We did see a little bit of a dip last year. This is total number of projects too. We saw a little bit of a dip last year in some reflection with directors. A couple of departments in particular mentioned that they had some multi-year projects that started in 2021, extended 2022. So we expect the project number to go up again. If we see projects going down, we'll do some more inquiries. The other idea here is that the number of projects, like Mark said, quality versus quantity, but also just, is there something positive about doing fewer projects longer and putting more money into them, and maybe including more municipalities. So, there's a couple of different ways to think about this, and we'll continue to think through, to analyze why the data is what it is and what it tells us. I always get stuck here because the Zoom, I can collapse it. Zoom covers my hide. There we go. So one of the things that stood out to us in regards to just level of interest for this data is what percentage of our projects do we collaborate on? So looking at this data, if you go to no collaborators, so from left to right, that's the dark blue is 2018 all the way to 2022 in the light blue. Each bar represents a consecutive year. And so for instance, in 2018, around 40% of our projects had no collaborators. And then subsequently 1, 2, and 3 or 4 or more collaborators. So I think it's great to see that that the number of our projects, the percentage of our projects with no collaborators has gone down. There is that one outlier, and you know, we investigate outliers, but we understand that just you know, 1 year doesn't necessarily tell a whole story. One thing we were thinking about there for no collaborators is that bump we saw in 2021. The projects, the multi-year project that started in 2021, a lot of those were just with that one department. So it's something we'll keep looking at. And same with that outlier for one. There's a big bump from you know, projects with one collaborator from the organization went from a pretty steady 30 to 40% all the way up to 55%, and that's great. You know, that's great. It is a big bump, and so we want to do some work with our staff, with the staff, on why they might think that happened. Part of the reason why we were looking at this is because we noticed, and we'll show it in a second, is that the number of here, I'll just go to it. So it's the next slide. The number of so one of the big level things we look at are what within each project, how many Metro Common goals is each project advancing?
Ben, could I just interrupt for one moment, please? Just on the previous slide, you don't have to go back, but I just think it, and Ben, you'll correct me if I'm wrong. A collaborator does not mean an external collaborator, like we're working with a faith-based organization, a municipality, and a hospital.
Sorry, thanks for
how many MAPC departments are collaborating together
Mm-hmm.
on a project. So for example, if it's no collaborators, that means, so maybe it's just a land use project. Or if it's one collaborator, maybe land use and arts and culture are working on a project. That it means MAPC departments. Ben, am I correct about that?
Yeah, thanks for clarifying.
Right.
And yeah, I think one of the things that we see consistently in data is that it's rare. It's evident here is that it's becoming rare and rare for it just to be a land use project, or for it just to be an arts and culture project, primarily because a lot of them involve either one comms, data services, or community engagement. So whenever those groups are brought in, that goes from being no collaborators to one collaborator. So we anticipate that some of the change there is I don't know if they're we know something to see is if they're working with that more, or they're just reporting it more often, is something that we're going to ask staff moving forward. Thank Mark for that clarification. Yes, and so we wondered, does that, if there are more collaborators per project, per Mark's clarification, does that mean that each project is representing more Metro Common goals? So what we wanted to identify is how many Metro Common goals per project are we advancing. So in 2018, we saw 2.5, and they were actually they were even from 2 and 2.5 over the past 4 years, but we saw a big jump in 2022, which is really interesting. So we went from 2.5 to almost 3 Metro Common goals per project. And one of the reasons why we call that out, as you'll see in a subsequent slide, is that when we looked to see which Metro Common goals were advancing per project, we saw that all of them increased across the board. So we thought this would be interesting to analyze. It also speaks to potentially the correlation between if we can inspire more collaboration amongst teams and departments per project, then per project we can be working on advancing more Metro Common goals. So these are all the Metro Common goals. And again, it reads, so if you look at a climate resilient region, which is the first Metro Common goal to the left, it goes from left to right. The dark blue is 2018 all the way to 2022 in the light blue. You know, these vary somewhat drastically sometimes. So what I try to look for is trends over time. One thing that I've called out before for us, I guess one caveat to make is that some of these just lend themselves more easily to be highlighted or to be picked by project managers. So for instance, healthy and safe neighborhoods, the majority of our work, one could say makes the neighborhood healthier and safer. And so that one tends to get picked a lot. One of the ones that doesn't is economic security. That is when we're talking about an individual's economic security. So a lot of our programs work on economic development, which is more on the economic prosperity side, around the business side of the work. So it's really interesting to see an uptick there. I know Angela Brown has been working really hard on moving into that realm of work, and it was great to see that part. Another one that stands out to me was the Homes for All. That one had been going down over the last couple of years and saw a big uptick. It could be that it's around we did notice a big uptick in the MBTA communities work around the legislation that the state passed. And you'll notice that in the next slide around our uptick in smart growth too. So just a couple things that stood out to me looking at this data. So these are our strategic priorities during our strategic planning process back around 2015. We identified, sorry, I have some folks doing some work. Sorry, we identified 4 different strategic priorities to pursue across the organization: climate change, equity, regional collaboration, smart growth. 2 things stand out to me here. Regional collaboration has stayed around between 20% and 30%. One of our lowest reported strategic priority that we advance. One thing I know that we'll be getting into as we embark on our next strategic plan is what are the pathways to regional collaboration amongst our different departments? As we mentioned before, our bread and butter, which we'll talk about in a minute, is like a single municipality. We do a project like traditionally a land use plan with one municipality over a year or 2-year period. So what are those, something we want to investigate with staff, or what do they consider their pathways to regional collaboration through each of their departments, and how can we think about that through the next strategic planning process? The other thing that was interesting is that we had noted that smart growth had gone down pretty significantly since 2018, where 70% of our projects indicated that they were advancing smart growth. That went down to almost 30% in 2021, but now has seen a recent uptick again. So whether that is some of the new legislation that's been passed that we are being actively called upon to work on, or if that's just a sentiment among staff around thinking of their work as being more dedicated to our smart growth, is something that we want to investigate. And then it's great to see equity bouncing up. I try to go through and qualify that so that we have a relatively consistent perspective on what makes a project equitable or just kind of the status quo. And so it's great to see that at least more folks are thinking of their projects or injecting equity into their work. We differentiate our projects by these 4 categories: single municipality, multiple municipality, region-wide, and statewide. Single municipality means, like we talked about before, it's our traditional project where we work with one municipality on a subject through a contract, and then we move on to the next one. Multiple municipalities means we work with more than one municipality on a project, and they are collaborating together on that project. Region-wide means, as it's indicated, a project that spans the region, then statewide, and then none are more our internal projects. So the one thing that stands out to me here, and that we talked about somewhat with directors, was this dip around single municipality projects in 2020 and the rise in multiple municipality projects from 2020 to 2022. There definitely could be some interesting COVID ramifications there around our traditional work kind of lowering, and maybe our more collaborative work heightening. And it's something that we want to be on the lookout for moving forward. We like to just account for how much of our work is happening in each subregion.
Would you mind if I interjected something on the previous slide?
Yeah, whenever.
Very briefly, if we could go
Sure.
back to that. I do feel that I do want to underline the sort of COVID impact that Ben just mentioned there. A lot of communities had to terminate projects more frequently. They put them on hold. And we as an agency had to undertake a tremendous amount of collaborative work to address the COVID pandemic. and the associated economic downturn. That continued during the vaccine era because then we were all focused on vaccine administration. I think there's actually been a little bit of a boomerang since then. I have found that, and I hope people won't find this a depressing comment. I just think it's kind of important to recognize. I have seen a lot of communities just kind of say like, we kind of got to get the blinders back on, get back on our work, get our own stuff done. We've like dug a hole for ourselves. There's a lot more to do. And there's just a little bit of tiredness in the collaboration space these days. I think we'll get through it. I think people are right that there's a lot at home that still needs to be done. But I think that's the reason for the big uptick in the dark blue and the somewhat precipitous drop in the orange. I know that my goal for this year is to see if we can get those back a little more in line, maybe with what they've traditionally been, such as 2020, because we do like to see multi-municipal projects as a high percentage of our work. Getting communities to work together is it's a big raison d'etre of this organization. And we're going to keep pushing on it. Regional collaboration, after all, whether it's 10 communities or 3 communities, is one of our strategic priorities. So that's just a little bit about, I think, the upcoming work that we need to do.
Thanks, Mark. We like to just note where we're doing work at a sub-regional level. This slide is slightly different than others, where the dark blue in this case is the number of residents in the MAPC region that live in that sub-region. It just kind of helps us show relative to population size how much work we're doing there. These can vary somewhat dramatically by year to year. You know, the sub-regions are big, and a couple projects here and there can change the data to a decent to a great extent. And so we just mostly use this to inform our sub-regional coordinators of where work is happening, and where we might want to direct more resources or make a bigger effort around starting projects. But mostly this data kind of is in line with population size to the extent that we want to match it with to that metric. So this map we do to show how many projects we're doing around the region. So if you look, the darker the municipality, the more projects we've done there over the past 5 years. We like to overlay that with some demographic data. And for this, we use the environmental justice communities data, which means that the municipalities outlined in black are municipalities that have 50% of more of the population living in block groups that are designated environmental justice. And you get designated an environmental justice block group if you meet any one of 4 criteria, which are around English proficiency or language spoken that's not English, non-white population, and I believe a low income population. And so this tells us a couple of different stories. One, how much work are we doing in municipalities that have large EJ populations? And if you look, as per the sub-regional data, we work a lot in the inner core. But that also means we're working with a lot of municipalities who have high EJ populations. This also, there's a certain value to that, but there's also a value, of course, in working with municipalities who are usually inaccessible to those populations. So it's good to both see that concentration of work, but also it helps us to identify places where we haven't worked that could use our services to become more accessible. I can share if anybody's interested, I can share the source to this data in the chat. And then we broke it down just to be a little bit more clear. So across the bottom, you'll see from left to right, this is the percentage of our projects that were in municipalities with 75% or more EJ block groups. and then 50 to 75%, 25 to 50%, and less than 25. So you can see a large proportion of our work, more than half, is in municipalities with more than a 75% population, EJ population, which was interesting. And again, is there's value in that, but there's also value in working with the other municipalities for different reasons. No need to really dig into this too much. We like to recognize which municipalities we haven't done single municipality projects. So again, this is just the projects where we're working from one MAPC to one municipality. And it doesn't mean that we haven't worked with these municipalities in another capacity, but this just kind of helps dampen some of the noise and the data across a lot of different types of work. So we do this every year, and then we go through the list with our directors and say, is there work to be done in these municipalities? And if so, how are we going to get access to them? There's been some really great success stories, particularly in Randolph, where we hadn't worked with them for a while, and now we have a number of things going on there. And that's it.
Great. Thank you so much, Ben. I think that was really valuable information and certainly demonstrative of the types of the variety of work and the areas, of course, that MAPC has a presence. Are there any questions or comments for Ben? No, I do not see any. I think that's a sign of a solid presentation, Ben. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a great day, everybody.
Okay, moving on. Next item on our agenda is review plans for annual council meeting and elections in May.
I'll start this off and see if Lizzie wants to add anything. She promptly popped up on the screen. Thank you. So the annual council meeting is scheduled for the 31st of May. Some people may not know this, but we are statutorily required to have our annual council meeting in May. It actually says May in the general laws. And we're getting it under the wire. We're doing it on the 31st. It is going to be our first in-person council meeting in 3 years. So it's a big event. I need all of you to be there. And the reason for that is, first of all, I think we should celebrate the fact that we can do this and that we are doing it. Secondly, the Lieutenant Governor is going to be there, and I don't want to be embarrassed. Thirdly, I desperately need a quorum. And from the last meeting and the last council meeting that we adjusted our bylaws slightly to make it a tiny bit easier to achieve quorum, but that change means like we need 63 instead of 68 or something like that. It's not an enormous change. And Lizzie and I just don't know how many people are going to show up to an in-person event. We have a great venue in the Seaport Artists for Humanities. And Artists for Humanity, and there will be food. There will be the Lieutenant Governor who is going to speak about the priorities of the new administration. I think it'll be a really good time to hear from Kim. Obviously, she's a friend to many of us. We've worked very closely with her over the years. It's not like the first month of the administration, but it also isn't 2 years in. So it's really a good inflection point, 5-6 months in to the administration to hear what they're focusing on. It's a little too soon to have many things done yet, but it is certainly soon enough to really know what some key agenda items are. And that's what she's going to talk with us about. We must adopt the FY24 budget. That is probably the most important reason why a quorum is required. And so I hope that you will all be there. I also hope that you will encourage your friends to be there. If some of you come from communities and perhaps you're going to be away that week or something, and maybe you haven't appointed an alternate, please appoint an alternate so that that person can be there. Or if you can't be there, but you have an alternate, give them a call, let them know, make sure they go. So that's a little bit about the annual meeting. Lizzie, I'm going to see if you have anything to add.
Yeah, I think the only other thing is obviously the elections piece. So we do have a nominating committee that will be meeting on May 2nd, and we'll put forward the slate for officers, but the annual meeting is also the meeting where we do all of our elections for executive committee and for our officers, which is the other reason we need all of you to go. And you should have actually already received nomination forms from probably that came from either would have come directly from Mark or from Patrice, or maybe both.
I think they came from me, but believe me, it was Patrice who was
who hit go on that, as with so many things at the agency. So you should make sure to nominate yourself for those for the executive committee positions and for the officer positions if that applies to you. And we will be holding those caucuses. So that's the other reason that we really need all of you there. The other big thing that we do at this meeting is the Legislator of the Year award. So it's just another nice opportunity to kind of be in front of legislators who've done really great work for and with the agency, and a chance to kind of give them a thank you in person. And we'll have more information about that probably at our next executive committee meeting, if I had to hazard a guess, which will be the one right before our annual meeting.
Two short things to follow up on that, Lizzie. Thank you. Patrice, I think you're probably taking notes and you're there, but could you come on the screen for a moment? Would that be okay?
Her least favorite.
Hi. Patrice, did we cover everything in terms of nominations, or is there anything else that you want to say in terms of encouraging people to get their forms in?
Well, I always want to encourage people. Hi, everyone. So please turn in your nomination forms if you haven't. And also, if you are, if you would like to be an officer, turn in your nomination form and the statement. And also, thank you. And I'm going to get off camera now.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Patrice. Patrice really, monitors and oversees a lot of these processes at MAPC and deserves a lot of credit for doing so. I know she's often behind the scenes. I actually have a list from Patrice of the people who have not yet turned in their nomination form, so I'll probably give you about another 24 hours, but then I will send you a personal note asking you to send in your nomination form. I think we've got all the officers in. I'm not 100% sure of that, but I think we do. Might be one missing. So that, I think that's that. Oh, I'm sorry, on awards. My expectation is that we will be discussing the Legislator of the Year awards with officers this coming Monday, I believe. And just to preview that a little, with their approval, I think we will be moving to a system of making an award to a legislator and also an award to a staff member. It's been our perspective that, we often deal with great underpaid, overworked staffers at MAPC. It's our sense that legislators actually love the opportunity for those staffers to get a little recognition. And we're going to try and do that. We've generally just done a system of making awards to legislators, but we're also going to try to make sure that we recognize staff in a public setting. And I see Karen particularly giving a big applause for that.
Great, thanks, both Mark and Lizzie. Are there any questions on this agenda item for either Mark or Lizzie? Oops, seeing none. Okay. Steve, did you have a question?
So I was going to actually wait for you to announce items not on the agenda, because I think that's what this falls under, but
okay.
So I didn't want to get ahead of you.
Okay, so you're on mute. So with that said, we'll move on to other business not known at the time of the posting of this agenda.
So here's my question, and I apologize if I'm the only one who doesn't know the answer to this, but I have a meeting on my schedule for next Tuesday for council member orientation. I have no idea what that is. Am I the only one who doesn't know?
Lizzie or Angela will describe that.
I am glad to speak to that, Steve. So so we do an orientation to new council members, people who are just coming to MAPC to kind of understand what we are and who we are. And we invite, I think, all of our executive committee to attend that. because it helps for people to kind of get a sense of who our executive committee is, because we talk a little bit about the board structure, and to put a little face to the name. So we love it when our existing board members can kind of be there and introduce themselves. It is not a mandatory meeting, but we would love to have you come. The meeting is typically run by Sasha Prodi, who is our sub-regional manager and spearheads a lot of the community engagement work at MAPC. And like I said, just a chance to kind of orient our new council members to sort of who we are and what we are and what it is that we do, and opportunities to work closely with the agency.
It is probably a little bit more, honestly, a request to the one or two of the officers to join us. Anyone from the executive committee is welcome to join, but normally at these meetings, we will have, I'd say, 3 to 6 new council members. So we don't need 25 executive committee members. That would seem a little silly, but that's what the meeting is. We do try and orient new council members several times a year, and that's the purpose of this meeting.
Are there any other, is there any other business? Nope. Okay. Seeing none, that was our last agenda item. It is now 12:30, and so I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Okay, I believe motion by Colette, second
Second.
by Mo. Assuming there's no discussion with this.
Well, there might
additional
be.
Roll call, Mark.
Jennifer, there is a request from a member of my staff, Eric Hove, to plug an upcoming webinar on stormwater issues, which I have a feeling Vandana would support our plugging. So why don't would you be willing, Jen, to let Eric speak to that for just a moment?
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. Sorry to delay the meeting closure, but we have a great webinar coming up Wednesday at 2 o'clock. We're launching our stormwater report. Back in 2010, the region received 1.5 feet of rain over 3 days, and flooding was just completely throughout the region. We actually got access to flood claim data through a really innovative data sharing agreement with FEMA and MEMA. And we've been working on this report for quite a while, so we're so excited to get it out and to release it. Ann Herbst, who's recently retired, is the primary author, along with Rachel Bowers will be presenting on it. And then we have a panel where Maya Mansfield from EEA and Jason Mamoni, who is the Director of Engineering for the town of Dedham, who's done really great work through their regulations, try to minimize flood damage, will be joining as panelists. So if you're available next Wednesday, I think we already have like 300 RSVPs, so we're looking great, but there's always room for more, and we'd love to have you if you can make it.
Thanks, Eric.
Can I ask a question? Will there be a recording of this webinar?
Yes, we will be recording.
Okay, great. I cannot attend, so I would love to watch it later on. Thanks.
Great. Any other questions for Eric? Okay, so go back to the motion to adjourn from Colette and second by Mo. And Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we may need an additional roll call where we already did the omnibus roll call.
This is just a roll call to adjourn, Jen.
Right. Correct. Okay. Imai?
Aye.
Colette?
Aye.
Karen?
Aye.
I'm not sure if Adam has joined.
Aye.
Okay, thank you, Adam. Myself, Jennifer, aye. Tom Daniel? John DePriest?
Aye.
Tom Galligani? Thought I saw Tom on the screen. Mo?
Aye.
Diego?
Aye.
Tabor? Angie Lou?
Aye.
Gina?
Aye.
Steve Olenoff?
Aye.
Sandy?
Aye.
Vandana?
Aye.
Sam?
Aye.
Steve Silvera?
Aye.
Elaine Vanya? And Erin?
Aye.
Hey, with that, we are adjourned. Have a terrific afternoon, everybody. Thank you.
And I'm going to ask Karen and Lizzie to stay on for a moment if possible.